Hi everyone, I'm Ferd and welcome to my video. Today I'm working on a Kohler Courage valve cover gasket. These are notorious for leaking. In this video, I'm going to explain these valve covers to you the best that I can, show you how they function, and show you how to repair them. I hope this video helps you and prevents you from having to do this over and over again. Enjoy the video. Got one I'm doing a service on. It's a LTX 1042, and this thing has a serious oil leak in the front. But the first thing I'm going to do, get this thing off the trailer, and I'm going to get the pressure washer out and clean this thing up. I want to start by taking this heat deflector off. There's 4 number 10 bolts, 2 on each side of it. Take them off and you should be able to wiggle this thing out of there. Just above the muffler and below the valve cover, there's 2 number 10s on that bracket supporting the muffler on the top. Take those out. The muffler is bolted to the head with 2 female T40 bolts. The valve cover gasket can be replaced without removing the muffler, but I found a couple of problems here that needed to be addressed. There's a baffle missing off of the front of the muffler, causing exhaust to be blowed against the shroud and creating excessive heat in that area. Also, the exhaust manifold gasket was leaking. Blowing exhaust right against the back top corner where that valve cover mounts. You'll notice later on in the video that that's an area that I had a really tough time getting off. I went ahead and just completely removed this muffler because I needed to replace that gasket. It was leaking. There's 7 number 10 bolts on the valve cover. If your cover has the muffler bracket on it, it's a good idea to replace those 3 bolts with longer ones if you can find them. I've found them stripped out before, and I found one stripped out in this one where they're not long enough and they don't go all the way through the hole. Now to get that cover off of there, sometimes it's a lot easier to start at the bottom if you can grab it with your fingers or get something up behind it and kind of jiggle it from down there. That's going to be its weakest point. This top corner was kind of tough, and I had to get a screwdriver in and give it a little bit of help to get it off of there. I went ahead and took out the spark plug because I'm going to have to turn that motor to adjust the valves a little later on. I've scraped it off the best that I can. Then I'm coming behind it with some steel wool and cleaning the rest of it off of there that I can't get with the razor blade. Just being very careful not to scratch it up too bad. And to save the best part for last. This is going to take a while. I'll come back to you when I got this thing cleaned off a little bit better. Well, if you didn't already know it, this is the famous valve cover off of the Kohler Courage engines, and they're notorious for leaking. And a lot of people have trouble getting them not to leak anymore. I've had a pretty good success rate with them, so I'm going to share with you what I do to seal these things back up. Now, the first thing I did was clean this thing up. Cleaned all the gasket material off the cover and off of the engine. And the other part, you'll see that it didn't stick very well to the engine, what they used. And I believe it was the right stuff. That's my opinion on what that was that they used. And there was no gasket. I always use a new gasket. I've got a new Kohler gasket. That's what I went with. You can buy for the same price as that one 4 aftermarkets, a pack of 4. But when it comes to something like this, I'd rather just spend the extra money, be safer than sorry, because this is a fire hazard. So the first thing, I've got it all cleaned up and ready to go. When I lay it on this flat surface, you can see that it's kind of bent out of shape. I want to try to get as much of that shape back as I can. Something to pound on and something to pound with. Try to get it on a flat surface. And I'm going to tap right around where they had this thing bolted on there. And they had it bolted down tight. So tap on that a little bit. Just hitting it nice and flat. Come around and do this other side. And we'll set her down. And it's feeling like it's off a little bit up here in the middle. Hopefully you get the point of what I'm trying to accomplish here. If you got a smaller hammer than what I'm using, it works out a lot better. Just tap it a little bit, test it, inspect it, tap the area that you think you need to tap down a little more, test it, and you'll eventually get it. If you don't feel comfortable doing this, you may be better off just to shop around. You can find these valve covers relatively cheap. I've got it tapped out pretty flat. Don't want to get too carried away with it. You end up doing more damage than good. The main thing is to get this part flat where the bolt compresses there and pushes it in, and to be able to look down the side of it and see that it's pretty straight. This was on there pretty flat. I don't see any gaps anywhere. So I'm ready to continue on. This valve cover plays an important part in the operation of this engine. Understanding what that is, all the parts that are involved in this valve cover, I believe will help you be successful when you put a gasket on it. This part needs to be clean and free of any oil before you try to reseal it. A lot of people don't realize it, but there's a baffle that's actually pushed down into the center of it. You have to look pretty hard to see it. It comes out fairly easy, and you need to take this thing apart. Under that, there's an oil filter. I want to take that out. On the back side of the baffle, next to my right hand, there's a reeve or a valve. Down by my left hand, my index finger, you see this little tiny hole. That's actually an oil drain hole. It drains back into the engine. And here you can see both of them on the front. This big hole on the outside of the valve cover is like an exhaust port. There's a hose that goes in there and it connects to the air filter near the carburetor. Inside the engine, you have what is referred to as a pulse. When the piston's going up, it creates a vacuum. When the piston is coming back down, it creates a pressure inside the crankcase. The pressure is released through that valve in the baffle and travels through the back side of it and comes out the exhaust and goes to the filter. From there, it's burned up in the engine, reducing the emissions that are released into the air. Now going back to that filter that's behind the baffle, when the gas is passing through that, it collects any liquid oil and takes it to the bottom of that cover in that baffle, and it lays there. Until it reaches that little hole, it can drain back into the crankcase. This saturates the gasket on the bottom of the cover. My belief is that between that and the pressure that it's causing inside there weakens it to the point to where it leaks. I've got the hole lined up, this one right here, where the bolt's going to go through. And if you can see down into that gasket, you can see where the lip of that baffle goes underneath it. But you can see the edge of it right there where it goes under that gasket. And that's where they always leak at. I've had a real high success rate on this. So high that I haven't had one come back yet. Knock on wood. But let's get this thing sealed up. I'm going to use the top of the tube's gone. I always cut them off and seal them up like that. They last so much longer. But it's Permatex high temperature sealer. It's the red stuff. You can use black or whatever you want, but make sure that it's high temperature. And we're going to seal it up with this. And then we're going to put the gasket on it. Okay, I'm going to take this baffle and I'm going to put a bead just on the bottom side of it here. Okay, I got that ready. I got my sponge in there. And I'm just going to push it down on there. Now I'm going to go ahead and just silicone the rest of it. On my gasket, this is the back side of it. Go around the back side of the bolt holes there. We'll just layer down on here. Now, you can bolt it to the motor at this point. I don't silicone this side of it. When you saw me take this off of there, you saw how easy it was to remove that silicone from that machined part of the aluminum head. It's not a very good seal at all. I came up with this jig for a couple of different reasons. It keeps the mower out of my shop while I'm working on this little valve cover. And I started using these when they had these old style covers that had that lip that flipped around the opposite way. It just seemed a lot easier for me to do it on this jig, line that gasket up perfectly, snug it down how I wanted it to without it slipping around everywhere, and let it set overnight, dry, while I'm working on other stuff. I've got my sealer on there. What we want to do, we're going to put this thing on there. Make sure you get them all started. Your muffler bracket, this part of it where these nubs are sticking out with your threads, they're going to go back that way. Yeah, 3 of them on there. All the bolts have been cleaned and degreased, and I'm going to just run them all down finger tight. When I use my ratchet on it, I'm just tightening it down enough to compress that gasket against the sealer to let it ooze out, seal the back of the gasket, and then we're just going to let it set overnight. It's the next morning. It's been about 12 hours, plenty of time enough for it to cure a little bit. And one thing I want to point out while I'm thinking about it is if you've got the muffler bracket, it's a good idea to try to find 3 bolts that are longer than the standard ones that are in there. They usually don't go all the way through because you've got that extra space and they have a tendency to strip out. Find some longer bolts and replace those 3. The torque specifications for this valve cover here, since the holes have previously been used, are 7.5 Newton meters or 65 inch-pounds. One thing you always want to check on these bucket engines, these Kohlers, are these bolts right here. I'm going to show you why. Look at that. I could turn that off with my finger. And then there's another one over here. These, if they come loose and they hit this flywheel, they'll tear the motor up. And those are normally the ones I come in there and check. This one was kind of loose, got it snug. This one I can't get a wrench on because somebody used a pair of vice grips on it. There we go. I used a file and filed it back down. Now I can get a wrench on it. And I'm just going to tighten that thing down. And then when I take this back, I'm going to just pre-warn the owner about it and let him know that this is one good reason for him to send it back every year for a yearly service. Now the intake, I'm so surprised this thing even started, because I can take the biggest feeler gauge that I've got there and it almost fits, but the next one down from the largest, 30 thousandths. Watch this. See, that one's like way off. This should be 5 thousandths. Okay, these valves, I'm on top dead center. I need a number 10, number T15. I want 7 thousandths on the exhaust. And the way we're going to do this, use the T15 to loosen it up. We'll put our feeler gauge in there, and we're going to turn the nut. Right about there is where I need it. I'm going to hold that wrench steady and then tighten that Torx down. And there's my 7 thousandths. Got her back up and running. Got you some close-up views behind that valve cover, and you can see that there's not a drop of oil coming out of there. And it'll stay like that. If you made it this far in my video, thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you got some good information out of it. Don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button on the way out. Join the channel. Channel's growing pretty fast. Got a lot of videos up there. I got a lot more coming. Don't forget to hit that notification bell and get notified as soon as I put them up there. So if you're working on one of these Kohler engines, been having trouble with it, try the techniques that I showed you in this video. Fix it one last time and have fun.